Hello, welcome to Circuit to the Abyss. I'm your host, Richard Gerlach. With me, as always, is Matt Brandenburg.
Hey, I feel like we're all back. It's been like a year.
And Vitlame Mist.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm probably just totally tapping on the glass here. So just to make sure you guys are here. Are you guys here? Tap, tap, tap. Yeah, you guys are here.
Yep. And we have a special guest, author of Please Don't Tap on the Glass, and director of I'm Dreaming of a White Doomsday, Mike Lombardo.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yay, welcome. Yeah, this was exciting. I've been seeing it out, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to check this out. So this was a good excuse.
Oh, totally.
It was a good excuse to read some horror.
That's right.
Oh, yes. And it's just nice to have this collection out. We were talking before the recording. It's just like, I don't know. It's nice to have Mike's collection finally out there. People can read these gross, depressing, horrific works of horror and the weird.
I agree. I think it's great that it's out.
Get it at all your favorite retailers.
Yes. Amazon.
Yeah. Go to your local 5 and Dime. It's $4.99. We'll give it to you in 2 easy installments.
Well, we're going to be covering a few different short stories from this collection. But before we dive into the collection, we like to give a weekly rundown of some movies that we have seen the last week. We did not record last week because I was at Necronomicon, which...
Lame excuse.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was too busy doing panels, but...
You're excused from having the time of your life.
Yeah. I was
will
too busy doing nothing.
For anyone listening in October, if you go to the Outer Dark podcast, you'll be able to hear recordings of the panels I was on at Necronomicon, and you'll be able to hear my first public reading that I did at Necronomicon, which will actually be a re-recording because my live reading was accompanied by a jam band that was playing outside. So the audio is unsalvageable.
Come on. We know you hired that jam band. We know you love 20-minute long songs with weird solos.
It's not my fault the beer garden had hippies, okay? That's not my fault.
Uh-huh. We know you love the didgeridoo and like the triangle.
But that being said, Necronomicon was a blast, but one movie I'd like to recommend fans of the podcast, I don't know if you guys have seen this one yet, but it's called Glorious. It just debuted on Shudder.
Oh, I've been hearing about this.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of it, and I'm still kicking myself. Or actually, more, I should be kicking Shudder for not allowing distribution to Europe.
Ooh.
Shudder.
I've been told, actually, Edward Lee was just telling me, he's like, you need to watch it. Because I made a short film called The Stall about a guy trapped in a public bathroom during a Lovecraft apocalypse. He's like, you will love this movie. So I'm very excited to finally see it.
Yeah.
Seen The Stall, you'll definitely love this movie, Mike.
It looked wild. I'm very excited. I have to get a Shudder subscription because I need to watch that and Mad God. I've been dying to see for many years.
I'd suggest instead of doing Shudder, look up AMC Plus. It's the same price, plus you get more. You get Shudder and everything else.
Very good.
But so Glorious is about a man who's played by what's his face? The brother from True Blood. I forget his name. He finds himself trapped in a restroom, or the public restroom, with a elder god that's voiced by J.K. Simmons, whose voice is
of course he is.
Stall, that is adjacent to a glory hole.
I was gonna say, I feel like you're missing the selling point, the glory hole.
The glory hole. And the god is demanding something of our main character, and if he cannot provide it, then our universe is going to collapse.
Okay. So there's a glory hole, and the god is demanding something. Is it what we think it is?
No, he actually puts his stick in it eventually, and the god's like, what the fuck is that? I don't want that.
I was going to say, just for the record, I think we've all been there. I mean...
You're just like,
I know this is a documentary. That's wasn't it home.
This movie is tons of fun. Like it is definitely, if you have Shudder, it's worth the watch. If you don't have a Shudder, it's worth just getting the 30-day free trial and canceling after to watch it. It's I don't know, it's one of the best horror movies I think I've seen all year. I'm also a sucker for like cosmic horror in film, which is super hard to do right, and I think this is one of the few movies to get it right.
And just to do 2 plugs regarding that, and again, glory hole, I can't help myself. Final Guys did a cover of it. It was very interesting to listen to. And then Fangoria's Colors of the Dark, which has Rebecca McKendry, who directed Glorious. She does a big, like an hour or so discussion on making it. And it was really interesting. So anyway, that was my side story plug. Gotta plug other podcasts. I mean, come on.
That's true.
Yeah.
And besides that, I've been reading Maxwell Ian Gould's collection, Oblivion and Flux, who I met at Necronomicon, and it is a wonderful prose poetry collection about the gods of cyberspace and the indifference of technology and human plight. It is surreal and fucked up, and I love it.
Sounds like
Gotta love the surrealness.
And the last thing is, I'm a manga nerd, as everyone knows, and I've decided to emotionally torment myself by reading Goodnight Poon Poon, which isn't really a horror story, but it is a horror story. It's pretty much, it tackles a person's life from the age of 11 to 22, and kind of how everything goes wrong for this boy, and he grows up to be a horrible person that's a product of his environment. And it is one of the most accurate depictions of childhood and mental illness I've actually ever read.
Oh, nice.
It's really fucked up. Like, I wouldn't really recommend it to a lot of people. It's, again, really fucked up. But it's also really good. So that's kind of my main things. One thing I do like about Poon Poon is all the characters are drawn super realistically, and then Poon Poon's drawn like a cartoon bird.
That works.
And then they put all the trauma on this bird. But Matt, what about you?
Oh man! So since it's been like forever since I've been on, it has been a lot of reading. So I won't go into everything. A couple things I will pull out. Jonathan Raab's new one, Haunting at Camp Winter Falcon.
I bought
that. It is amazing. If you love his style, which is very much this weird occult, aliens, conspiracy theory kind of stuff, this is chock full of it. But he captures this life of veterans and PTSD and just what America, kind of the hidden thing about veterans that we sort of gloss over. Of course, you know, I'm also a veteran, so a lot of the stuff he brings up in here hits really close to home. And it's one of these books that, of course, it's dealing with these crazy alien things, and it's dealing with this mind altering drugs and what people see, and there's ghosts, and it's just bonkers. It's 100% his style, but like, it's one of those things I want other people to read just to see, like, hey, you know, veterans go through some shit and we don't do anything for them. And even like the glossing over, you know, I mean, especially the last like 15, 20 years, we try to make the military seem so magical and this wonderful place. And then like, when you're in it, you're like, no, it's not. There's a lot of shit that you deal with in there, and it sucks. And he captures it all really well. So it's just one of those things that I think people need to read, not only for the horror aspect, but just to kind of see this and bring it out more to light. So it is fantastic. I've loved everything he's been putting out since what is it? Terror in 16 Bits, which was like a Muzzleland video game anthology that was amazing. Everything since then I've picked up without question. So that one's great. The other one I read was this book called The Hatak Witches, and my poor mispronunciation is going to come out here in full force. It's by Devon A. Mihesuah, Mihesuah. And it is about it's like a detective story, but it's focused on the Choctaw Indians, and it's this really X-Files-y kind of thing where there is a museum and they have a bunch of bones from all the, you know, indigenous people of the area, and I think this is Nebraska I'm not 100%, but I think it's Nebraska. Anyway, they have all these bones, and of course, it's something it has been in the news about trying to return the bones so the proper burial grounds and all that stuff. Well, security guard is murdered. Another one is attacked horribly in a room that nobody can get into because it's only got one key and there's a camera on it at all times, and nobody ever goes in there because it is this secret room. And so, of course, you got a murder in there, so now you got to try to figure it out. So very detective of trying to figure out what it is, and then you start realizing that there's these, it kind of goes into this Choctaw like myth and legend. So if you're into that kind of thing, it does a lot in showing you that kind of what that mythology is and where these, ancient things come from. And there's these owl people that are half human, half owl, and they can change back and forth into the two when they want. And they're going after these certain bones that were part of a witch way back a long time ago. And it gets really weird. There's this really cool ending of this battle and this like kind of thing where you have to cross a bridge, and if you're evil, then you're going to fall into this pit of doom and be tortured for millions of years, and if you're good, you can cross. So it's just all this good stuff. It was I think she had said that it was a university published book, so it's not a hugely available thing, but I'm pretty positive you can find it on Amazon. It's definitely worth checking out, especially if you're kind of into that. One, if you want to help support Indigenous authors, this is a great way to do that. And if you're into that kind of reading that mythology, and of course, if you're into X-Files, it's definitely worth checking out. So the Hatak Witches. And I think that'll cover it for me.
Vitlame.
I have not been reading much at all. I thought I was on a roll during my summer vacation when I finished like 4 books, and I was like, yeah, this is amazing. I've never read so much in such a short amount of time. And then it suddenly just, my head was like, yeah, that's the limit. So goodbye.
It happens.
It happens apparently. But yeah, I did finish, because I didn't have time to talk about other things the last time. I did finish Todd Kiesling's Devil's Creek.
Nice. What do you think?
I thought it was really good. For me, I think it kind of is like a 4 out of 5 stars for me. What I didn't really like about it, I think it might be because I didn't read that much in that element, because I can see there's a lot of Stephen King vibes in this book.
Oh yeah.
Like so much Stephen King vibes, and I think that's probably the reason why my brother thinks it's like the best book in the world. But for me, what really kind of like did not make me give it like a 5 stars was like I didn't feel like there was a solid main protagonist.
Oh, interesting.
Because you're given the view, like the point of view of I think it was called Jack, I think. But at the same time, he doesn't do anything, and the point of view shifts from him to the rest of his siblings, and I'm like, so who's the main protagonist here? And then it occurred to me, I was like, no, wait, it's the grandma who is the main protagonist, but I want more of her. Why didn't you give me more of her?
Yeah.
It should have been about her.
You should check out his book Scanlines.
Oh, God.
I have that book in at home, but I
Really?
when he saw that warning that it has like a huge adaptation about suicide, I'm not gonna tackle that right now.
Yeah, it's a lot, but
it's like it has graphic descriptions of it. I'm just like,
yeah,
I'm okay.
Once you're in the mindset, it's worth the read, but you need the mindset to be able to handle that.
Yeah, exactly. So once I'm in the right mindset, I'm definitely gonna read it. I mean, he is a phenomenal storyteller. Yes. I mean, I'm not gonna lie and say he's bad. Like, no, Todd is a really, really good writer. So yeah, I finished that. What else did I fucking finish? I've started the Sandman. I've started watching the Sandman series.
Oh yeah,
I love the Sandman series.
Yes, I really do. I've read the comics, not all of the comics, but just a bunch, because my public library had only, I think, about 2 books when I was 14. And I decided to rent them along with Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura and all the manga shit they had. It was a nice combination between those. It was like,
Oh yeah.
you know, cute and
Sandman's
bubbly
a lot when you're
things.
14.
I know, but it was good. It was a nice like little touch of spicy flavor, I guess, that you can add to all the cute bubbly things. But yeah, I haven't finished it. I have I think we have about 3 episodes left. It's phenomenal. I really like the casting and just how the storytelling is evolved. The episode with Death, because that was the comic book that I had when I was 14. It really resonated with me. It was really good.
That's a great episode. That
Yeah.
and the diner episode are like 2 fantastic episodes just back to back.
The diner episode was fucked up.
Yeah.
It was like a whole other like direction that I thought it would go, and I did not expect that. So I was like, "What the fuck is happening? Why did it go into horror territory?"
Dan Bartnett, who friend of the podcast, he was messaging me while he was watching the episode. He was like, "Man, this episode's really horny." And I'm like, "Oh, just you wait." He's like, "Wow, that was really fucked up."
Yeah, it was so horny, like holy crap. And my husband and I, we actually just thought of it. It was like, isn't it being like shoving? It's really just shoving it in your face.
Yeah.
And it's not asking for permission. It's just like really cramming it into your throat and be like, do you enjoy this, you motherfucker?
Like, how far into the graphic novels does it go?
It covers up to the serial killer conference.
Okay.
So that's like the first volume and some of the second volume.
Yeah. Okay. I haven't watched it yet, so I was just trying to figure out like how far along it was going.
It pretty much covers the whole first volume and then like I think the first 2 parts of the second volume.
Nice. Okay.
So yeah,
it looks sweet.
Oh,
it really is. Yeah. So yeah, I haven't finished that. You said at the beginning that we can trash a movie or 2, and I don't know if you guys have watched it. It's on Netflix, but I watched the Day Shift.
I haven't seen it yet. I heard it was terrible.
It's awful.
Aww.
It's like I wasted 2 hours of my life, and I'm like, I'm kind of pissed that it was for free. I was like, on Netflix, because I was like, I kind of want it and demand my money back.
Netflix owes me $20 for a refund for my month subscription.
Oh yeah, okay, I can probably do that, but they have other stuff that I actually kind of like, so I'm kind of powering through again. But yeah, I mean, they're even though it had stellar actors, I mean, Jamie Foxx and for some reason Snoop Dogg.
Yes.
But I'm telling you, having Snoop Dogg there did not save the movie at all.
Snoop Dogg usually does make things better, though.
It did not in this case. I thought it would, but no. And it is so funny. I think he probably had in his contract that he was supposed to be the guy who saves the day at the last minute. While also be the guy who sacrifices himself, and I'm like, ugh. The only I can give out one positive thing. The only positive thing in the movie were 2 Eastern European brothers. They were dressed like Blade, basically.
Nice.
And they were just in one scene. They kind of joined with Jamie Foxx in raiding a vampire's nest, like in the middle of the day, and they dominated that scene. They were so fucking cool, and I was like, why aren't they the main characters? I want more of them. It's like basically seeing the Winchester brothers just on crack. And they were so funny. They even though they were gross, I mean, there was a scene in which like one of them had bubble gum and the other one didn't, so he just spit it into his mouth.
Oh my god.
And I was like, oh, gross, but at the same time, like, I mean, okay. I mean, it works for some reason because the guys they are disgusting. So
I mean, I guess they're that close, right?
yeah, I mean they only have each other, you know. Hopefully they don't wank each other off. So yeah. So yeah, like the movie, just the plot was incoherent. James, his name is what was his name? Franco, the Franco brother.
Oh, was it Dave Franco?
Yeah, Dave Franco. He is just stupid and just really useless, and I don't know why he should have been there. Like if the reason was to have him there, it should have been that put him like as a main character, not Jamie Foxx, because his kind of situation with him having to tail Jamie Foxx basically and be like and watch him so he doesn't go off the rail or something would have been more interesting than Jamie's storyline. And it just all went. Just the ending was awful. The main villain was just not interesting. There were a lot of interesting things in it. Like they had like a whole society of vampire hunters basically that had like a lot of bureaucracy involved. And I thought it was interesting. And they were like they got like money from selling the vampire's fangs.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Why don't you explore that more?
Yeah.
Or they also like had these kind of different kinds of vampires, and instead of showing it, they were just telling it. It was basically just Dave Franco listing all the vampires, and I'm like, yeah, stop, show it to me, yeah, bitch. But it didn't. They just pointed out some of dead vampires, like that's a Eastern and that's a Hyper, and I'm like, what? No, show it.
Right.
Like, show me they're like really super powerful vampires. Don't just show it to me when they're like dead and it doesn't show me the promise.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah,
annoying.
this was a really bad fucking movie.
Oh.
Could have been, like I said, they had potential, but they just completely like.
So what you're pretty much saying is the best vampire comedy is From Dusk Till Dawn still.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. You can't beat that.
Yeah,
No.
you can.
You can't. Mike, what about you?
As far as books, I just finished reading Kin by Chris Enterline, who's actually the cover artist for Please Don't Tap on the Glass. That's his debut novel. It's kind of like it was very surprising. It's very like a Civil War drama about a woman who's widowed because her husband is killed during the war, and she's raising her son, and she runs afoul some Wendigos that are kind of like werewolf-y things, but it was really, really cool. It's kind of a slow burn. It's very much character focused, and then it just goes kind of batshit crazy at the end. And I was not expecting that. So I was very surprised at how, like, literally there's a moment when the main characters are literally knee deep in gore. And I was like, holy shit. It's a lot more violent than I was expecting it to be. So that was really good. And I just reread The Reborn by Bryan Smith, because that's going to be, I had to blurb it because it's getting re-released. And that book, if you've never read Bryan Smith, he always airs on the hardcore, more extreme side. But that book legitimately disturbed me. And that's really fucking saying something, because I mean, I have very extreme taste, but that book, it's about a guy who is struggling with the urges to become a serial killer his whole life, and he finally lets loose, and he murders this girl that he grew up with that he's always had a crush on, and puts her head in a cooler. And the next day, as he's kind of reliving the glory of these memories, she knocks on his door, and she's alive again, but she's now like obsessed with him, and she has no memory of being murdered. And as they discover very shortly later, her head is still in the cooler. It's just like a weird, fucked up doppelganger that is. I don't want to give too much away, but it is wholly unique and insanely disturbing. Like, there are some scenes in that book that are so upsetting. I actually had to put it down for a second. I was like, oh my god.
Oh my god.
It is a nasty, nasty, nasty. They just did the cover reveal on Twitter, and they got brutal posters to do the cover, and it's just this really realistic like shot of a head and a cool. It's a really disturbing cover, but I think it captures the book perfectly. Like I don't think that people are quite ready for this book right now. Like it, I mean, it was published probably 6 or 7 years ago, but I think it kind of flew under the radar, and I think there's gonna be a lot of people who are very surprised at how nasty this thing gets. Even with the recent like rise of extreme horror kind of coming back, which is very cool. But this book is like a whole nother level. Like it's not even like super like I mean, it's graphic, but it's not. It doesn't wallow in gore. Like it's not like just constant description of violence and stuff. It's just the ideas. It's actually fairly restrained, but it is a very, very disturbing book, and I highly recommend it.
Holy crap, that sounds rad. What was it called again?
It's called The Reborn by Bryan Smith. I mean, really anything by Bryan Smith is a safe bet for the most part, but that one has always been my favorite of his. And then as far as movies, currently I'm a huge. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, so I'm a huge movie buff. I'm chewing through my giant. It's not even a to be watched pile. It's a shelf, like an entire book. But I'm watching the extras on a Blu-ray of Stage Fright, which is Mihesuah's first film. He's the guy that directed. I don't know if you guys are familiar with The Church or Cemetery Man. Della Morte. It's an Italian, of Italian movies from the 80s and the early 90s.
Yes. Cemetery Man's awesome.
Cemetery Man is a masterpiece. So this is his first film. It's about a theater troupe that are putting on a musical, and an escaped mental patient serial killer sneaks into the theater and puts on the costume, this big weird like owl man costume.
Yes.
And kind of starts killing them off. And it's just really like mildly surreal and just really, really, really well done. Like you can definitely see the Argento influence because Mihesuah was his understudy. So you can definitely see that. It's a really, really great movie. Highly recommend that. And then I just got in the mail the Out There Halloween Mega Tape by Crystal Martina, which is the sequel to the WNUF Halloween special, if you guys are familiar with that.
Oh, I fucking love the WNUF Halloween special.
I
yes,
was so happy
so
to see
good.
this.
So this is the sequel, which is set in the 90s, and it's about it's a TV special about it's a live broadcast about alien abductions, and it is fucking hysterical. So interesting full disclosure, I did some of the effects work in it. There's a fake trailer called Blood Gavel for the final verdict, so I did the Freddy Krueger type judge character for that. But I was a fan of WNUF before I met Chris, so that's what was really exciting that I ended up working on a bunch of his movies because I was a fan first, and then we became friends, and now I got to work on some of the stuff. So even if I was not involved in that small amount, I would have still recommended. This is a really, really funny movie, and like he nails the 90s commercials. Like, my nostalgia gland was bursting when I was watching stuff. It was so good. I think that's screening at some festivals currently. Actually, I think it's playing at Creature Feature as we are recording this. But I think the DVD and the VHS is available on his website or somewhere. You could probably find that on the Google. But highly recommend it. Very, very good stuff.
Yeah, because that's pretty new, if I remember correctly.
That came out like a week ago. Yeah.
Oh wow!
Man.
Do they have great parodies of 90s commercials? Because NUF did so well with 80s commercials.
Yes, I don't want to spoil anything, but this is actually a sequel to the WNUF Halloween special. Like it is in universe, same news broadcast station and everything, and it ties into the first movie. I'm not going to say how, but it is. I was very, very happy with what he did with it. It was very, very good.
Oh, that's so amazing.
That's awesome.
Oh, and Stage Fright. I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a great, great movie. It's been years since I haven't seen it since I was in high school, and I just randomly I found the Blu-ray very cheap. So online, I'm like, you know what? I would love to revisit this. And I was like, oh, I forgot how good this was. I've been on a Suave kick lately. I just watched The Church the other night too. Very cool stuff.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, just that it's that whole like kind of Italian stuff, and just the idea of the costume was so like unique and crazy. I loved it so much.
I just the image of a man with a giant owl head wielding a chainsaw. It's just like, what is this? Like, I love it.
Right. I mean, it's right up there with Motel Hell. Come on.
Oh God. Love Motel Hell. Huge fan of Motel Hell.
Oh my God. Oh God, I could talk about that one for a while for sure.
All right. Well, I think it's time we shatter this glass and talk about the gross, traumatic, and beautiful stories from Mike's collection. Um, we each tackled a couple, so we can we can each list what we covered, and then we kind of go on from there. But the two I read for this were Dead Format and Weekend at Escobar's, which both were great. I think I liked Weekend at Escobar's a bit better, but they were both a wild ride.
Yeah, I did, and this is I did The World in the Window, which we'll describe. Yeah, that's what I was like. That one like is depressing on a different level, but ends kind of hopeful. You know, I like that. And then I went to the other extreme and read No Comment, which was absolutely hilarious and will be a lot of fun to talk about, especially for Brian Keene fans.
And I picked Please Don't Tap on the Glass. And then in a completely 180, I picked Just Like the Real Thing.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
Is that the one?
Yeah, that's the one.
I was wondering who was gonna end up with that.
It's just my luck that I always end up picking the stories that actually are not a good fit for me. I'm like, what the fuck? But at the same time, I mean, it's good to talk about. I can dissect this thing. I mean, bring it on. They're both, like I said, they're completely different stories. But and while I enjoy the grossness, just like the real thing, the Please Don't Tap on the Glass really resonated with me. So yeah, that's my favorite.
Thank you.
Well, I love right off the bat, and I'm not Rich. You didn't say, but at least for Vitme and I, we both read stories in here that were completely different from each other, which I think is awesome in a collection to have like different stuff like that.
Yes.
Yeah, no, even the stories I read were very different from each other. But with this collection, I had read Doomsday and Play Place, and both those are also very different from each other too.
That was really what I wanted to do with the collection is I wanted to kind of veer, like I kept telling people it's going to be the most bipolar thing you've read in a good long while, because the stories, when I was putting the order together, it's like hyper depressing, insanely disgusting, then this one's funny, then this one's really sad, then this one's really like hopeful. Like it's a big mishmash, but I think the book perfectly represents my head and what I do. I'm glad you get a sampling of like complete polar opposites. That's very much, you get like total whiplash reading this, so I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good enough description of it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I like too, and we can like bounce around, but I love that you put the notes like at the end of each story, because when you're talking about oh my goodness, when you talked about the window and the different ideas you had for the ending of that, I had to laugh because it was like I was thinking a little bit of that too, where I was like, oh, I wonder if it's gonna go, and I'll describe it in a second, but I was wondering if it was gonna go a certain way, and I like how you were like, well, it's an episode from an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, when I had the one pre-reader, when I wrote that story, because that story is probably 5 or 6 years old. When I first had my initial round of pre-readers, they're like, that was the original ending. They're like, this is like an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I was so giddy, because I'm like, that's exactly what I was going for. No one's gonna like that except for me, so I'm gonna change it.
Oh my god, that is so funny. Yeah. So I guess just to describe my story real quick, since we're on it, Chris Sunderland is our main character, and his fiance, well, going to be fiance, he was planning on proposing. She died, and that's not a spoiler, because that's the beginning of the story, is where kind of a couple days after the funeral, and he's just completely, out of it. He's extremely sad and upset. He's still in the same clothes. He's still got grave dirt on him. And we kind of, as we're going, we find out Jen, which is his girlfriend, or Jennifer is his girlfriend. She was in Rome like a year while they were together, and they would Skype, which is funny because we're on Skype. They would video, maybe not Skype, but they were video chatting every single night. And you know, it was just this kind of tradition at a certain time, and we kind of get to the point where he's remembering just what happened, and then the funeral stuff, which I think you captured really well, of the like, how are you doing, and things will be okay, and all this stuff. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm at the funeral. And I love to even put a little joke about that now. What was it? Now that's what I played at funeral music 7 or something.
Yes. That was actually cool. That was a direct quote from real life at a funeral I was at. That was it.
I was like, oh, that's so perfect. So he so you know, he's dealing with stuff. The time comes that he normally does a Skype call, and he pulls up the call, and she's there. And so then they start chatting, and you know, it's like this really sweet kind of story of her ghost or whatever it may be, telling him that, like, hey, you know, you need to keep moving. You're you know, we're together and it's fine, but you need to kind of move on and things will be okay. And so it's like this really sad and sweet story of just like kind of dealing with grief. And I think you even mentioned, I like what you mentioned in the story notes of not only is it kind of maybe dealing with death, but also a breakup, and how that kind of, that life, you're so used to a certain thing and now your life is completely changed and different, and how do you kind of move on and deal with that. So yeah, I really like that. And you know, I think I'm gonna keep bringing up the story notes because I'm terrible in the past when we've done stories of missing the story notes. So I really appreciate that you put it right there, because otherwise I would have not even noticed. So I love that you kind of call that out, and like, it sounds like you might have dealt with one or both of these situations in the past.
100%. That story was based very, very close. All the stories in this book were based on real life experiences. For the most part, I'll let you decide which ones are real and which ones aren't. So,
I think the Brian Keene one might be half and half.
But yeah, that was a very, very personal story. The girl I was dating at the time, well, not at the time I wrote it, but she was in Rome. We had a long distance relationship after she went to Rome for art school. So she left, and then we had to continue our relationship through Skype. And there's a line in the story that says, like, when they would be talking and she was in her studio doing paintings, she would walk off screen. Yeah. And then he would just get kind of sick to his stomach, because it's like you have such a tenuous connection to somebody when you're long distance as it is. But for them to like leave the screen, it's like they don't exist anymore. And it just was this weird like spike of anxiety I used to get. And it's kind of like your entire world is literally in that little computer window. But that was literally what it was. And I kept thinking a lot about, I had a lot of friends who passed away, and it always kind of bugged me out. Like, you can see the last thing somebody wrote, like on Facebook, like literally the one instance, it was minutes before this person was killed in a car accident. And it's just crazy, like, that it's still there, and it's almost as a digital ghost that like someone can go and just dig through your entire life and all of your thoughts and feelings, and it just sits there because you can't, you know, you don't take it down. You don't have much of a password for it. I mean, now I guess Facebook has a thing where you can turn it to a memorial page, but that was kind of in my head. And then a lot of the story was inspired by my father passing away, and I still have his cell phone number in my phone. And it's like, what if I called it? Like, what would happen? I mean, obviously I know what would happen, but it's like, what if he answered? Like, what would I even say? Which I think is something that a lot of people have come to me and said that they've had very similar, not, I don't want to say like fantasies, but like weird thoughts like that after they lose somebody. Because it doesn't feel real. You know, denial is a hell of a thing. And it's a strange thing, doing long distance relationships and all that. And yeah.
Well, and it's what is weird, and like now in this kind of day and age is exactly everything you said. It if you didn't know, it would theoretically seem like they were still around. They just hadn't posted in a while. And so it's just this kind of weird like situation of it's just being there. Or even like you said with like, you know, on Skype, I guess maybe you can go through and erase chats. I have no idea, because like I have chats from like 6 or 7 years ago, and it's just kind of weird that it's just sitting there as opposed to like a conversation, which is a little bit more in your head, but can be warped and disappear, where you have this digital kind of thing just sitting there at all times. So I think you did, it's like a neat way to kind of capture that concept and that idea, be like, oh man, it's just there. And just that like staring at like your video or your phone and being like, exactly what you said. What happens if I call, or I did call, here's the last text message. And it's just so weird to kind of think about, where probably in the past it was maybe a letter and then that was it. So
but it's everything is so immediate now. And like we have, if you think about it, you know, I'm 35. So when I grew up, having a home movie or something, that was a special occurrence, because you had to get like a VHS camcorder and stuff. And a lot of people don't have that. Now, the moment that you're born till the moment you die, every millisecond of your life is recorded. And you know, kids growing up, you've got thousands and thousands of hours of video of everything. Like you could literally string together like in someone's entire life in video and photo form. It's so weird that we're so, I don't even know how to describe it. Like we're so recorded. Like you could, a complete stranger could literally like vicariously live your life through all that stuff. And it's like, that's a really wonderful thing, you know, if you lose someone, but it's also a really painful thing to be able to have access to all of that. Like it's very, very complicated feelings about that sort of stuff, but it's something it's very much a modern issue that I don't think that we really necessarily had 20 years ago.
I completely agree with that.
Yep.
I'm the same age as you, Mike. So yeah, I definitely feel this, and it's sometimes really jarring to be like on social media at this moment. Like for example, what I'm seeing right now, I'm not that often on Facebook, but what's really like flooding Facebook right now is all of the people that I'm following there, like posting pictures of their children going on their first day of school or something.
Mm-hmm.
There's just multitude of these pictures, and I'm like, this is just it's not like a trend or anything. This is just a movement of sort.
Yeah.
That we're not going to get rid of now that it's here.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of when we had Danger Slater on the podcast to discuss Moonfellows. And one of the ideas behind it was just like 10, 20 years ago, you would be friends with somebody at work, quit your job later, you two will never meet each other ever again. But now you become Facebook friends with everybody. So people who you would never think of like 20 years ago after meeting them once, you can now look at their entire lives.
Like we allow so much access of complete strange. I mean, it's kind of veering off, like not even necessarily what I was writing about, but it's wild. But it's so wild that we allow access, like complete full access into our lives to complete strangers. Like people will come up to me at film festivals or conventions and they'll ask me questions like, hey, how is so-and-so? And I'm like, I don't even know who you are. That's normal now. That's a completely normal thing to me. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, of course you would know about like my cousin's brother. Like it's just fucking but we're so conditioned for that. And I think about this a lot too. Like we go back, you know, like an archaeologist, you know, and they're trying to uncover like all of this. They'll go into like a pyramid, right? And they're looking at like these ancient cultures and trying to piece together what their day-to-day was like. 200, 300 years from now, they'll literally be able to watch every major and not an insignificant event that has ever taken place in human history in this era. They can watch it in real time.
Yeah.
Don't you think that they might find that to be completely boring? Like, where's the mystery behind that?
Yeah, you know, I agree. But it's very strange. Like, there's no more, you know, there's that famous quote that history is written by the victor. But like that's not a thing anymore. There's no way that you can't objectively view history anymore because you can literally just watch it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's obviously media bias and all that, but it's just crazy. And I'm going real on a tangent. I apologize, but like it's just wild to me. Like 100 years from now, like kids that are in school will literally like 9/11 is not going to be in a history book. They're literally just going to watch footage of the planes hitting the towers like we did live when I was in high school. Like it's, you know, we look back on like Super 8 reels of like the Holocaust and it's like that can't be real. It doesn't look, it's just so, the magnitude of it is so wild. It's so huge and horrible. You can't even fathom it being a real thing. And there was, even with those small clips that we have, but now literally you can watch everything in HD quality throughout all of history. And you can, at the same time, you could watch the trade towers getting hit. You can watch some kid ranting about what he thought of the new Star Wars movie when he was like 13. It's so fucking weird to me, but that this is where things are now, and it's this hyper accelerated worldview that we've had, because like I said, 10, 15 years ago, this wasn't a thing. I remember when we first got the internet, and it's like, make sure you don't tell someone like how old you are or what city you live in. They might like find you. You can literally Google map someone's address and watch their house. It's crazy to me.
It's so true. I remember just like, I don't know, it was like 5 years ago, the big thing I would see was like, don't post when you're going on vacation because people would know that you're not home. But now it's just like, well, let me just get into your ring and then I'll see where you're at, and then
exactly. Yeah, it's just it's very crazy. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I have no idea, but it's very strange.
It's crazy.
It's a thing, definitely.
But to go back to your story, you ended it very beautifully, and I appreciated that. So.
Well, I will say for the two I read, I'll start off with my favorite of the two, which I liked both a lot, but I honestly loved Weekend at Escobar's.
Thank you. That's my favorite thing I've ever written, actually. I'm very excited about this. I wrote that a long time ago, and it never saw the light of day.
Like, I like how it starts off kind of like this comical Weekend at Bernie's parody, and then it just gets like so sad and like fucked up the more it goes.
That seems to be a trend in my writing.
But like, also, I took a quote from the story just because like I love the description, but like it was also like a lot. But it was after he kills Escobar, and you just wrote, the remains of his stomach contents mingled with the spreading pool of blood from Escobar's head started to resemble a grotesque Jackson Pollock painting. Like, it's the perfect description, but it's also really messed up. But I also like how it ties into like the character's own personal trauma, which again, for the author's notes, which I appreciate there at the end, kind of ties into real aspects of your own life. But like, I just like how you really just tied it all together, and then the ending with the nice little JF Gonzalez cameo.
Yes.
But even the ending, just having that, like, you're either going to kill this person or we're going to kill you in a snuff film, then it just ends. That's just...
when I wrote that, I remember one of my roommates at the time wanted to read it because he was very excited because I was telling him about it, and he was reading the story, and he's just watching the reactions on his face from the start. He's like laughing, and then as it goes, it just gets worse and worse. And then at the end, he literally just like, his jaw dropped, and he just stops, and he didn't say anything. He just got up and he walked out of the kitchen. And I followed him, like, "Yeah, all right." He's like, and he just didn't know what to say. He's like, and obviously anyone who's listening to this, spoilers, but he's like, "You just ended a story where a man was asked to beat a 12-year-old prostitute to death with a hammer." And I'm like, "Yes, I did." Like, I thought this was going to be a Weekend at Bernie's parody, and I'm like, "That's how it started." that was the plan.
I love that. That used to be one of my favorite movies when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's a delightful movie. But it's got a dark undercurrent to it. If you really think about it, it's
it's so fucked up.
Remains and all that, but the story literally did start off. It was going to be like a super goofy, like fun thing, and actually the original version of it was it was going to be a zombie story, and there was going to be a like I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I had notes for it where there was like some kind of new drug that had a side effect of like reanimating the dead or something like that. So they basically kill this drug lord, and they stuff all these drugs in his corpse so they can get him across the border, because that's a thing that actually happens. Like, people do that. The cartel ships cocaine through corpses that are being sent over the border. And the drugs, like the condom that is in basically inside this corpse, it breaks, and it ends up reanimating this drug lord's corpse. So this guy is now wandering around as a zombie, like in Weekend at Bernie's 2, but he's filled with like, you know, 60K worth of drugs. They're trying to track him down so they can get their drugs back. But meanwhile, he's like causing the zombie apocalypse because he's biting people. And like, it was a real wild, like hilarious thing. And I started writing it and then it just turned into this.
I will say I did laugh when, spoiler, when our main character accidentally kills Escobar. And the guy's like, "You're not going to fit all that cocaine up your ass." And he's like, "Well, except the body."
Yeah, you can probably fit like 2 or 3 condoms worth comfortably, I'll say, comfortably. After that, I mean, it's possible, but you're going to be walking like a cowboy. It's definitely very unpleasant. And, you know, it's a long drive, so you don't want to sit in that.
But yeah, no, I did like the whole like flashback to the main character's childhood, where like killing Escobar just made him remember this like horrible event from his own past.
Yeah, well, so that really became the major theme of the story when I was writing it, and that was something that I was dealing with at the time too. It was just the idea that your past informs your future, and even if you don't realize everything that you went through, like we're really just an accumulation. We're just walking scar tissue from every event that happens in your life, from when you're a child up until the day you die. All of those things shape your worldview and the way you react to things, and you might not even be consciously aware of it. And the thing is, you can try to run from your past as much as you want, but it's always waiting for you at the end of the tracks. And that's kind of became like the central image for me. Subtextually was the roller coaster that you're strapped in. You know, you're going up the hill and you know it's going to suck. It's like, I'm going to go down this fucking drop, but there's no way off. It's like you just got to hold on and just take the ride, but you see that the tracks are broken in the middle, but you can't do anything about it. And that's how I think something that in my life that I feel that I find myself writing about a lot is just like a lack of control, and how scary that is, that, you know, everything can be great right now, and 2 minutes from now, your entire world could come crashing down, and you have no way to prevent that, or no way of knowing that that's what's going to happen. And you just kind of have to deal with it. And that was, I think, what I was in my head when I was writing this story. And that's why it went from a goofy Weekend at Bernie's style zombie story to a dissertation on snuff films and child abuse, horrible near-death experiences in my own life.
It was definitely a kind of a wild experience. But I also kind of like how Dead Format was kind of a tribute to the whole shot on video like era of movie rentals.
Yes, and another wonderful part of my life.
Which that one is the main character. Well, first off, it starts off with just the main character having a conversation about 80s porno. But I like how he watches this like really shitty like shot on video slasher movie that ends up becoming more realistic as it goes, and the realization that, oh, playing this video is actually bringing this death-like killer into my own existence.
Yes. So the idea with that was like that idea of like the haunted videotape, right? That's a classic horror trope, like going back to like the video dead. And I love that idea. Some of my earliest short stories, I found like a notebook from when I was in elementary school, and I wrote a story called The Blob, about the blob coming out of the TV and killing my family. So I've always been obsessed with that idea. But when I wrote this story, I really wanted to just fuck with that trope a lot. So that's why, again, spoiler, when the killer comes out and is trying to kill him, he accidentally hits pause and it just stops the movie. So the killer just freeze frames. And then he just rewinds him back out the door. So I was like, what the hell else would you do? Like, take the piss out of that trope. And then again, it turned into like a really somber, sad surprise, a very sad personal dissertation on grief.
That sounds amazing.
It's a really good story. Like both of them ones I read were solid. I know Vitlame got the really gross one though.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the title story. It's called Please Don't Tap on the Glass. And it's about this. You wrote it in the first person tense, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're kind of like into the point, like in the perspective of this one person who is has to go take your mother who's been sick from I think kidney disease.
Yes.
And she, you take her to the ER, and because she's been throwing up like for the entirety of the week, and you're afraid, that the cancer treatment or something is not working, and so you go to the ER to, for a checkup, and of course, you're not allowed to go there, go there into the ER with your mother, so you're forced to wait in the waiting room. And while you're waiting there, this is the reason why I resonated so much with it, because I suffer from anxiety and I always jump to the worst possible conclusions.
Yes.
That once you're sitting there and and you're don't really have anything there to distract your mind, you start thinking about the worst possible thing that could happen. Like, are you going to lose your mom? What are you going to happen? What's going to happen if that happens? How are you going to face it? How are you going to deal with it? And you just see this person just spiraling basically out of control with these thoughts, and it was heartbreaking to read. Because this is what I would definitely be thinking if this would happen to me. And then in order kind of to distract yourself from these thoughts, because you do not want to dwell on these fucking thoughts, you kind of look to this, to the side, and you see on the wall there's an aquarium there, and it has these fishes that are just weird fishes. I love the descriptions that he gave these fishes. They were disproportionate. Their scales were missing at some point. They just looked really bad. And you as a reader also kind of got the feeling why the fuck are these fishes still alive? And and with this being the thing that you see, basically the only things that you can focus on, you are kind of drawn to them because they're so weird and gross out. But the funny thing that happens then whenever the sliding doors open and out comes, for example, a whaling family who are probably have lost a loved one, the fishes just swarm the glass. Just basically as if they're feeding on their sadness. And it was interesting to see, you as a reader, to see, kind of try to get that confirmation. You managed to put in two or three examples. There were two families who were, who left out of the ER waiting room, and they were in hysterics and tears and stuff. And then there was this one guy who you also gave a really good description. I forgot to mention that. Before his mother went in, there was a guy who had lost his hand from a chainsaw. And he was just waiting in the waiting room, just bleeding out, just having a time of his life, basically. And when he goes out of the ER, he's not in danger, or he hasn't lost his life or anything like that. And the fishes, they don't go to the glass after when he leaves. So you get that confirmation that these fishes are kind of feeding on the sadness of people. And then you kind of your thoughts go into what will happen if the fishes will try to get into your thoughts. And it was just a really nice way to see how you kind of display these emotions when something truly awful is happening to your loved one. And you managed to really bring it out in both kind of disturbing way, but also in a nice way, because you were at the end of you gave that kind of hope at the end of the story. Because when his mother comes, she's like, oh no, it's fine, it's just a stomach bug. Then you're you get this relief. And I really, really liked that. Like I said, this one really resonated with me. It was really good.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that story, again, this is another running theme you'll see in this book. That was all based on real events.
Yeah, I read that in the story notes. When you added in the story notes, that also resonated with me. I was like, oh man, this is a real thing, based type thing. So I feel for you, man.
Thank you. I'm just happy that you feel the same way. I'm not the only person that is my mental coping mechanism, is to just focus on something weird and just trail off to try to distract myself.
Yeah.
that was a really, really hard story to write, and it's actually one of the things, like, I had a lot of trouble even rereading that story because I'm literally just putting myself back in the headspace of when that was going on. And that's also what inspired White Doomsday, was that same scenario when my mother had kidney failure. And that's why I wrote that story as well. But thank you. I appreciate the kind words about that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you definitely you can see the emotions being poured out in that story. So yeah, that was really good. And then I had the unfortunate thing of picking Just Like the Real Thing, which, like I said at the beginning, it was definitely not directed at me as a reader. So, for those of you listening, and for Matt and Rich, it's about an 18, like a guy called Lee, who's just turned 18, and he is full of fucking hormones. Lots of hormones, and he is going to prove to himself and to his friends that he's not afraid to go into that downtown porn shop, because he is going to buy some porn, because he is getting sick and tired of trying to watch Girls Gone Wild through the blurriness and static of his TV. So he really gets the nerve, gets the courage to go down there, even though it takes a lot. And I can probably imagine that it takes a lot of courage as an 18-year-old, especially when you haven't experienced this for yourself. And at that time, because it's set in around, I believe, like in the 90s, because internet was still kind of a new thing. So going down that road must have been really, really hard. And it's really funny how he stumbles in there, because he kind of like has this motive of going there and to buy not only magazines for himself, but his friend gave him his Christmas money to go buy some magazines for him as well. So he has this mission to do that. But
love this.
So this is foreign territory for him. Like, he has never been in this before. He doesn't know what to do. And when he finally enters the store, he doesn't know what to expect. It's basically just a kind of like a closet. I kind of envisioned it just like a really narrow closet.
It's a very dingy, it's based on a real place. It's a very dingy little, like, you go down some stairs and it's like this, it's maybe the size of like 2 or 3 of someone's average size living rooms, like, put together.
Yeah. That's It was like really described really well, and I actually managed to imagine the dinginess of it.
Lucky you.
I mean, yeah, I know. I've been to a porn stores, and they were a whole lot cleaner than the one that you described.
I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of dingy porn stores in the States. Like,
Yeah,
it's kind of a taboo. It's not as taboo as it used to be, I don't think. But back in like when I turned 18, I remember going to a porn store just to be like, I can finally do this, and just it was one of the dingiest places I've ever fucking been.
And this was definitely like I said, set like 1999, 2001. Like, so it was a mom and pop porn store. It was not like there's like nice chains like Excitement Video that are like more like couples friendly porn stores. This was like a straight up like raincoat porn store.
Yes, exactly.
You 4 in the morning, like, prostitutes would hang out outside. Like, it's that type of place.
Yes, and you brought that forth vividly in the story. What I also loved about the thing is that, once he gets into this dingy porn store, because he's so overwhelmed by, being able to go into this store in the first place, and, he managed to brandish his ID and like, look, I'm 18, I can go here. He, because he's so overwhelmed, he stumbles into the fetish aisle. And just these descriptions that you wrote were so gross, but still so brilliant. I love the thing when you managed to capture his not his awe, but like his like, what the fuck moment when he finds the huge dildos. They were so funny. I was like, yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen that in real life, I mean, you're gonna be in surprise. And then when he finally stands, like, he kind of basically backtracks into like a wall of tentacle porn. And he, like, you know, grabs one of the one of the VHS, and he's like horrified by the sight of some woman being groped and penetrated by tentacles. I mean, he's gonna have a hard time if he reads Haley Piper's Queen of Teeth. I'm telling you.
Hilarious.
So yeah, he gets really overwhelmed by that, and he's almost ready to go, just, you know, to bail out. And then he kind of plucks up the courage again to go talk to the guy at the register, and he's like, "Do you have any Playboys?" And the guy at the register, he's just, you know, laughs it off. He's just like this guy in a wife beater who's, you know, typical store owner of a dingy porn shop. I could definitely vision it in my head. And he's like, "Oh yeah, of course. I was kind of worried that you were going straight for the fetish shit." And, you know, he managed to get some. And just before he leaves, he stumbles upon a guy who was in the store, who had been like eyeing him while he was in the store. And he managed to sell Lee a flashlight of type. But it wasn't, it's not like, it was kind of like in a can though.
Mm-hmm.
And he like Lee has never experienced anything like that before. So he asked, like, "What's it like?" And, you know, the guy just leans over with a smirk and says, "It's just like the real thing."
Oh no.
And when he said that, like, when I read that line, I immediately got the creeps. I was like, "Nope. This is not going in the direction I want it to be." So he kind of has it. I just really loved how you managed to capture the adolescent hormonal guy. It's just so funny. You know, like, he waits until 2 a.m. at night, locks the door, double checks if the door is locked, you know, just in case. And then he starts pounding that flashlight.
Okay.
And
two Girls Gone Wild commercial.
yes,
Oh, wow.
two. Yeah, he like hears the tropical music, and like his mind immediately goes to that place, and then his mind goes to a girl that he has a crush on, and like I said, Mike, it's really vivid and gross. And it's like, I don't want to be that teenager's guy's head. And then, you know, he climaxes inside the fucking flashlight, because of course he does. And then when he pulls it out, that's when the goopy parts come.
Oh no.
So he finds that his dick is smeared in blood.
Oh no.
And, you know, of course, when you read it, you're like, wait, did he get caught? Like, did his dick get caught in the can or something? And no, it's not the can. The can has actual, like, cut off vagina in there.
Oh god.
And the only thing that the guy hears is that, you know, as he's screaming his lungs out at the realization that he's been fucking at that pussy, he, you know, he only hears the guy's voice saying it just like the real thing. And what I really loved was at the end, when you put in the story, is when you said that I hope you guys can appreciate these stories. Like, I know a lot of you probably know the tropical theme song of Girl Golden Wild, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not that person. I'm like, no, I watch different kinds of stuff.
I'll say May is growing up as a kid in the 90s, if you're watching the Sci-Fi Channel or Comedy Central,
Yeah.
there's endless Girls Gone Wild commercials back then.
Yeah.
And
Okay, that's, I mean,
It's a Babylonian response. That music, if I hear tropical music, I'm instantly aroused. And it's like, God damn it.
I mean, I get that, but growing up here in Iceland, we had a similar thing like in the 90s. Like we had like a channel that showed it wasn't the Sci-Fi channel, but they showed X-Files and stuff. And right after X-Files, because X-Files played around I think 10 to 11, around 11, we would have like these light blue porn movies or something like that. And that was the time when it was supposed, because we didn't have it like on subscription, it would just go blur. So I knew about that, and I also was curious about that, but I never got a chance to watch it.
Yeah, I remember being a kid watching South Park, and like in this even now, South Park plays at 10 o'clock at night when it's a new episode. But just watching like South Park at 10, every commercial break had at least one Girls Gone Wild commercial.
Yep.
Every single one.
Constantly.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
it's like of course I'm not gonna not jerk off to it. Like I'm 14. Like, how could I not? Like it was that, or I pop in, Jason Goes to Hell and fast forward to the tent scene. And to this day, my VHS of that, I pulled it out. A friend of mine was over, and we were joking about it. My girlfriend's like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Go put that tape in the VCR for my record, just out of curiosity." It had been about 15 years since I watched it. I knew exactly where that, when she hit play, what scene was going to be on screen.
Oh my God.
It's like the tape's all worn at that point.
It literally was. It was paused and stuff so much. And to this day, I can't achieve orgasm unless my partner's split in half with a sign pole.
Oh my God.
But those were dark days back in the 90s. Like, you didn't have options. Kids today, they don't know how good they have it. You can watch literally anything you could ever conceive on the internet for free.
Yeah.
But back then, we had R-rated movies and TV commercials.
Right.
And lingerie catalogs from department stores.
The blurry channel that
I loved also the little tidbit that he put in, like that he would snatch his mother's Victoria's Secret secrets magazines off before she ever got a chance to look at them.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's
so again,
amazing.
embarrassingly autobiographical, that whole story. It's a tale as old as time. It's a coming of age story. I think we've all been there, like taking the magazine, trying to find, like, watch the scrambled porn and see like that murky, like blue and purple thing. It's like, is that a boob? I don't know. And then, up until the point where inevitably we all lost our virginity to a corpse part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's happened to all of us.
A tale as old as time,
It's a rite of passage,
I'm surprised that wasn't in our Are You Afraid of the Dark episode.
Yeah, I think that when they brought it back for the 5th season, a few years later, they did address that. It was a lot more subtle. They didn't like just overtly say that he was fucking a cord out vagina, but it was definitely implied heavily.
Oh my God. I love that.
I apologize that is the story that you got stuck with. I will say this, though. At least it wasn't appetites, which does make a brief appearance in that story, but appetites is actually worse. It's so
okay.
Sold.
Was appetites the other sex story that she wrote?
That was the gore porn story. That was my first published work was a gore porn story.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Like, here I am, world.
Yep, that's how I felt. I'm like, whoa, that's great that this is what people are gonna now know me as. Like,
I mean, before the gore porn story, it was you were the guy who made Womb 4 Review.
Yeah, it was Womb for Two. That's and that's why I'm really happy about, like, just the book having such a mix of shit. Because normally when you put out a collection, you want to theme it like, okay, this is going to be all extreme hardcore, or this is going to be all sad bastard stuff. But I didn't want people to just think like, oh, this is all this guy does. Because obviously, the stuff that I write and post and the movies I make, generally people think I just like gross, goofy shit. But like most of my things are actually very serious. So I wanted to give the whole spectrum, which is going to alienate half of any audience, which is going to be great. But you read just like the real thing and it hops to like some incredibly sad, somber story, and then it goes into appetites, and it's like, holy shit, what the
I mean, I remember back when you were still editing Doomsday, I wanted to see the movie really bad, so I hunted down the short story. And like that was one of the most traumatic short stories I've ever read.
Yeah, that's the general consensus from people I've found.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think we covered this at the beginning, but if we did, I apologize if we didn't. So what in here was published before?
So
or is this mostly non?
In the order that they appeared originally, Appetites was published in Strange Sex. Then Play Place was published in Zombie Brain Bang, which I fucking hate that title so much. That was
Yeah.
There's some great stories. This was all from Strange House Books, so all these books lean a little more heavily towards Bizarro, which my stories don't really fit in them, honestly. But so Play Place was in Zombie Brain Bang, and then Just Like the Real Thing, or no, I'm sorry, then it was on Dreaming of a White Doomsday. It was in A Very Strange House Christmas. And then the last story I did for them was Just Like the Real Thing, and that was in Strange Sex 3. Everything else was written over the course of 10 years, not in the order that they're appearing in the story, in the book, but they were never published. Like Weekend at Escobar's, I was invited to an anthology called Real Dark. It was like film themed, and I blew the word count, and then the story transformed into something. I was like, they're not going to want this. And I like sent a snippet, and they're just like, oh, wow, this is way darker than we were anticipating. Ended up, like, after I sent it to the editor after the book came out, he's like, I totally would have fucking published this. You probably would have had to trim it a little bit because it's a little much. But so, there's various things. And then Dead Format, I think, is the most recent story. That was from like 2 years ago. And that actually is going to be my next film project. You heard it here first, folks.
Hey-o.
The screenplay for that expands the story a bit, and there's definitely much, much more of an emotional undercurrent in that. It deals a lot with, believe it or not, this is going to be very surprising, grief and depression. That's much more front and center in the Dead Format film, but that project is going to be, it's the perfect mix of what I want to put out in the world, which is, it's got like the funny porn jokes and all that kind of shit. So there's some humor to it and some B-movie stuff, but at its core, it is actually a very emotional, sentimental story. So I'm telling people, it's kind of got the darkness of Doomsday mixed with the funniness of the old Real Splatter short. So it's kind of the middle ground for me, but it's very much where my head and creative thoughts are at the moment. That's kind of what I want to express to people. So I'm very excited about that.
I mean, it ends in a very emotional point in the short story, so I'm excited to see how it expands.
Yes. So the ending is very similar, but it's there's a lot more of that sort of thing. It's basically the story about him dealing with losing his dad, and there's some more stuff to it. Also, there's a chainsaw in it, which is very cool. So we up the factor a little bit. So that'll be good fun. So hopefully we'll get started on that in the next year or so. Would be the ideal.
Well, that's awesome. I'm excited. I thought you did a great job with Doomsday. Like,
thank you.
I remember getting that DVD or the Blu-ray on pre-order back when I was first able to. But
yes.
No, that was a great movie. So I'm excited to see what we have coming up next.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate that.
Hopefully you have more fiction coming out in the future too, because I definitely love your short stories.
Thank you. Yeah, the thing is, I write very infrequently. I have to really be in the mood for it. But I've got a couple things that I've been toying around with. I have some story notes for some stuff. Right now, most of it is just like extreme, gross shit. But we'll see. I got a story called Wet Specimens that I'm not going to get into, but it's about as morally reprehensible as you can imagine. And then there's another one called Carnival Night that I pitched to my friend Samantha Koliesnik, who wrote True Crime and Waif, and she actually got angry at me. She's like, "You are not writing that fucking story."
Amazing.
It's pretty fucking bad. That was a story that I was going to write for the World Horror Gross Out contest, and then decided against it. But that's hopefully going to be coming soon. So there'll be some more stuff. I'd like to do another collection of short fiction, maybe a novella or something in the future, but we'll see what happens.
That sounds beautiful.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I really want to... Oh, you go, Matt.
Well, I was just gonna say that, like, I mean, obviously from our descriptions here, what I loved was just it. it kind of like what you had kind of said about like alienating half of your audience, but I think I don't know. I really like that this is kind of captures like a really broad scope of what your work, because it I mean, just from hearing all of our descriptions today, I think there's just so many cool, unique ideas in here. And yeah, I love when collections are kind of themed, but I also love when they kind of show like, hey, here's everything I can do, and it's super awesome. So yeah, I think hopefully people are buying this because it's a really cool collection.
Yeah, it's been doing very well. I cannot complain about sales. Thank you to everyone who picked up a copy. I very much appreciate it. I'm mostly just excited that people are finally getting to read some of these stories. Like I said, Doomsday, I'm Dreaming of White Doomsday has been out of print for almost a decade, and I get asked on a regular basis where people can read it. So I did, when the movie came out, we did like a limited edition set that actually had a chapbook with the short story. But outside of that, those 40 copies, nobody has read that story in quite some time. So I'm very excited that they can now read the story and then watch the movie and then go on the internet and fan rage that the book was better. So I'm very happy about that. But yeah, and we'll see. There might be some more movie projects coming out of that book. I'm not gonna say anything more. We'll see what happens.
I love that idea.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Mike.
Thank you for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Anytime. And just to our audience, you could pick up Please Don't Tap on the Glass on Amazon. I think any other bookstore as well. I know it's definitely on the Kindle.
Yeah.
Available in paperback and ebook through Amazon. I think it should have expanded distribution. You should be able to find it on like booksamillion.com and Barnes and Nobles at some point. I don't know if that's gone through yet, but in the future, there's also going to be a limited edition hardback that actually I'm getting my test copy today, as a matter of fact. But that will be a few weeks from now. That'll be available, a limited number of those. So if you're interested in that, keep an ear out on my Facebook page, and there'll be some details about that soon.
Awesome.
Nice.
And what kind of listeners get in touch with you, Mike?
What's that?
What kind of listeners get in touch with you?
So the best place to hit me up is Facebook. Just look up Mike Lombardo. It'll be very obvious which one is me. YouTube.com/RealSplitter. There's a bunch of my old short films. And then obviously RealSplitter.com is the hub that has everything that's real with 2 E's, like a reel of film, because we shoot on digital video, so it makes perfect sense. Yeah, that's the hub. Everything is on there. You can find me through that. I'm on Twitter, begrudgingly, twitter.com/RealSplitter. So I'm all over the place. Please digitally harass me. I welcome it. And yeah.
And Vitlame, what about you?
Well, people can find me on Twitter at VitlameS.
And Matt?
I am also on Twitter at BrandenburgDM.
You can follow me on Twitter at Rudy53088, and also be sure to follow Staring Into the Abyss with the wonderful Twitter handle at Into Staring. And this is Richard Bilak saying, keep staring.